If I sound a little stuffed, I do have a cold today. I'll do my best to be audible. This should be a relatively quick call. I'll just be going into a little bit of detail about the latest CIOC features that were part of the upgrade that everyone except Toronto, Toronto has just received. Toronto should be receiving it within weeks or less, we certainly hope. So pretty soon this should be available to everyone. And all of our CIOC members have already been upgraded. The only feature I'm not going to go into tremendous detail about is the major new feature on the volunteer side, which is the volunteer profile. In part because we've already covered that in a previous training session, and anyone who wants to reference it can go and watch that training session. So I'll only be briefly discussing what the feature is, what it does, and a little bit about our plans for doing testing before we allow our members to turn that functionality on in their database. And we have a question.
Susan would like you to go over the checklist stuff before 3.
The checklist stuff?
The new, how to tie the new extra checklist to how to tie the extra checklist to a specific field.
Oh, okay. Well, I can certainly go over the extra checklists and what they're for. That was actually the previous upgrade, but I know you're 2 behind, and I have no problem going through that. And we're certainly going to be done before 3 o'clock, so no problem with covering that before 3. I'll leave it till the end, though, because it is from the last upgrade, not this upgrade. Okay. So there were a few areas of focus of this last software upgrade. One is our major volunteer new feature, which I just talked about, which is our volunteer profiles. That was a substantial part of the upgrade that you just received. We haven't allowed any of you to start using this feature yet because it is not ready for prime time. Because this is such a public-facing feature and because the public interacts with it independently, it's really crucial that we feel that sufficient testing has gone into it and we're comfortable with launching this to the public before we allow our members to turn it on. So we have had a number of people volunteer to participate in that testing, and anyone who hasn't already put in a request to us to be involved in that testing, please feel free to send us an email and we will put you on the list and give you access to our secondary test site where we will turn on email capacity so that we can do a thorough testing of this feature before we allow our members to turn it on. I certainly anticipate that we will be allowing the membership to begin using this feature by the new year. Hopefully before, but at the latest by the new year. And it will not require a software upgrade. It's already part of your software, but we may end up doing fixes or patches in the meantime if we identify during testing that there are any issues. But certainly we don't have to wait for any further major software upgrade before people will begin to be able to use that feature. The major CIC changes that we have two focuses. One are changes around data sharing and import-export, and the other are changes to the software to facilitate multiple agencies working in the same system. Okay, so the features are around those 2 major topics. And finally, this upgrade covers a few bug fixes and things that were not part of immediate repairs that we would normally do where someone reports a bug and we fix it right away. There were a few that we identified that we didn't get fixed until this upgrade. So one of those is the French find and replace tool is now working correctly. It's off the top of my head, it's hard to remember exactly which ones it is, but the major one is going to be that French find and replace tool that was not fixed until this software upgrade. And generally we do try and give you bug fixes immediately, so anything urgent would have already been fixed. So I'll start with the changes that we have made to the import-export process. So there are 2 related changes. One is mainly of interest to Find Help, who does the vast majority of the importing, and that is it's 2 different changes that are together supporting the ability to queue up a number of import files at once and then have those run without interfering with the regular use of the database. So the two changes are we've moved all the files into an isolated area so that they can be run as a separate process and not interfere in any major way with the normal operations of the database. As most of you will be familiar, we've had an ongoing issue with imports blocking effective use of any part of the software. And when CIOC moved to its new servers, we were able to isolate you from impacting each other. So if Hamilton ran an import, it wouldn't impact Halton, but it would still impact your own database. What we have done with this change is, although it may cause a slowdown, it does not altogether stop the functioning of your database or anyone else's, assuming that the server has been configured properly. The software has been organized in a way to allow people to run imports without completely shutting down any database, theirs or anyone else's. Does that mean you can run the imports at any time? No. It does cause a slowdown, so we will still request that our members be courteous and run their imports at off-peak times. Even in it does affect everyone who's on the same server and everyone who's doing other kinds of work. So just to be respectful, we do prefer strongly that no imports are run during peak business hours, but we can at least say that you don't have to wait till the middle of the night or anything like that in order to run these imports and not affect people's work. Further to assist in that is the second part of this change, this enhancement, which is the import queuing utility. It's now possible to queue a number of import files and have them run together as one operation. So I can take all three of my import files, which I'm doing right now, queue them for later import. Oops, I've already ran that one, apparently. All right, these two import files, I queue them for later import. If I hit Process Now, it's going to process every single record in that file one after another, and it will run for up to 12 hours. So it's possible, as I say, this is most of interest to find help, it's possible for them to queue up all of the import files that they get from every one of our members who gives them imports, to set them to run overnight so they can just put them all in the queue, hit Process Now, go home, and in the morning they will have all run overnight. And again, it will have done that without completely shutting down access to the database for other people. The queue does both adds and updates, so even people who don't have the need to queue up multiple files may still choose to use the queue because it's faster. It does allow you to do both adds and updates in one operation, whereas normally the add process and the update process are two different items. So if you know you want to accept the entire file, the queuing allows you to just run it all at once instead of having to process each part separately. Are there any questions about those import changes?
I'll note that we haven't done the configuration changes on the server, so
I'll
let them know.
And I did mention in our last training call, and I'll mention again now, that although we set up the software to support the imports running independently, we haven't done the server configuration on CIOC servers yet to support that, so this doesn't come into effect yet. We'll be sure to post on the bulletin board when we've made the configuration changes on the server. These are system admin changes that are required in addition to the software upgrade in order for this to work. So although we've made the software changes, and that's part of your upgrade, we have not made the system admin changes that also support this import process running independently and not interfering with other things. Okay, so that's it for imports. Pardon me, I'm just closing my enhancements list that I have up to remind me of everything I need to cover today. Further to the sharing enhancements that we've done, I'm going to go now to the export process and talk a little bit about how that has changed. In the previous upgrade, or it might have been 2 upgrades ago now, we added a section to the export process that allows you to specify a source database name and URL, and optionally a French source database name and URL, so that the target database had a record of the database from which that particular record set came. This was used for certain specific projects at the provincial level where they needed to be able to trace back where those records had come from. One of the major complaints we got was that people were wanting to change the names of their database or the addresses used, and they were having to type it in every single time. So because we were doing another similar feature, we decided to move that source database information from the export process back into your export profile. So I'm going to go to the setup area into export profiles. And you'll see now this database name and URL that you would have previously had to do every single time you were doing an export. Now you can set one. So instead of a generic community information database, I may want to have it say Inform Hamilton database or just Inform Hamilton. And if you wanted to change the specific address that was being used as the link, because it doesn't have to be your CIOC database, it can be your website or any other link that you wish to use to indicate the source of the information. Now you can save it once and have it automatically recall that every time you run an export instead of individually having to do it each time. And as I say, that was just a bonus change you got because of the real software change, which is this new Submit Record Changes to enhancement. Again, this is intended to support the provincial work that's being done where you're sharing your information into the provincial database, such that the long-term plan is that 211ontario.ca will now have feedback links that go directly to the source database. So rather than people submitting feedback on 211ontario.ca that then has to be sent to the record owner, who then has to copy it all into the form and process the changes and notify Julia and so on and so forth, we have made changes such that when you export a record, it includes a link to where you would like them to submit feedback information for that particular record. And not only does it give a feedback link, you can submit or choose the specific view and web address to which you want them to submit feedback. This is particularly important because the long-term plan is that anyone participating in this project to allow for external feedback is going to be asked to allow me to come into your database and create a brand new view with a template that looks like 211ontario.ca, so that users who are working in 211ontario.ca will be able to maintain the same look and feel, and it won't look to them like they're jumping all over the place to different sites. It will look to them that they are continuing to work within 211ontario.ca. It will have all the links back to searching on that site and be seamless to the end user. So part of what you will hear in the future once we're ready is a request from probably from Kathy and maybe myself to come and put this new view into your database that is specifically for working with 211ontario.ca and providing a feedback form that looks like 211ontario.ca. This particular view that we will be creating will not be searchable. It will not be usable for any purpose other than submitting feedback. So it will not be a fully functioning view. You won't be able to do a browse by organization or find any records or view any records. You will only be able to submit feedback. Okay, so it will be crippled so that it doesn't become confusing, so that it's useful only for the purpose that we want it, which is the ability to create these feedback forms. And in discussion with Kathy, she has confirmed that they will provide a minimum set of fields that they want on these feedback forms, but that each of you individually will have the freedom to add additional fields to the feedback form so that you can capture whatever full set of information you normally capture from people when they are submitting changes to their records. Any questions on that? There is another part to it, but before I go any further, do we have any questions on either the the feature or the upcoming project to have it integrate with 211ontario.ca. Okay. What you see here when you are actually creating the Submit Record Changes to is a combination of the name of the view, and this has to be a publicly available view, and also the web address that the person will access. This is because many of our CIOC members have multiple different database URLs, multiple different web addresses. For instance, forinfo.cioc.ca, durham.cioc.ca, informdurham.com, centraleastontario.cioc.ca. Those are all the same database. And depending on who is sending the information out, they may want it to come from a different address to indicate who the owner of that information is. And when each of them send out, they can each create their own profile. So there can be the forinfo find help export, where it would send them back to a feedback form that sourced back to forinfo, or you could all use this. In this case, it's going to be all to the 211 Ontario view. They will all be able to just pick the 211 Ontario view that's created and have a single export profile. I wanted to point out that this is also useful for you sharing information with each other, because it means that you will be able to submit feedback easily to the target or the source database when you have a record shared from another database. So there is a new field called Submit Changes To, which goes along with this setup item. So I'll go into the Field Display. There it is. The Submit Changes To field can be added to your record display, and again, it's your record display only. You can't change this field. It's automatically set whenever you receive an import, and that import has the Submit Changes To information in it. And what that means is if you display in your data management view or wherever, Submit Changes To, and then it would have the link to the feedback form of that source database, it means it's really easy for you to submit changes without actually having to go and search for that record in the other database. In the long run, we hope to have an additional CIOC feature where you will be able to make the decision about whether or not you want the public to automatically be sent to the source database through the Submit Feedback or Submit Changes To link whenever they see the suggest changes on their feedback form. So I'll just highlight what I mean here. That I'll do it from. Sorry, I'll do it from the public where I'm not logged in. This suggests an update link. The idea would be in the future, you would have the choice, if this was a record sourced from an external database, you would have the choice about whether suggest an update went to your internal feedback form where you received the feedback, or to a feedback form on the original target database so that they could directly process that feedback without you having to forward it on or resubmit the feedback to them. One of the additional features that we've added to support this work is the addition of an also notify email. So I'm going to go set up, use, any view will do. There's a new field called, I should be able to find it. I'll do it the lazy way. Here we go. Feedback notifications. It's called the Also Notify email. And in any view, you now have the option of specifying an email that will always be sent a copy of any of the feedback suggestions that are made in that view. What this means is, in the case of the 211 Ontario project, that because they have an obligation through their contract to follow up on any feedback submitted through their site, by putting an email in the 211 Ontario view, they will automatically receive a notification that feedback was submitted via 211ontario.ca to that particular view in your database. They will receive a copy of what that feedback was, and they will receive notification when you have processed that feedback. That also means that we're eliminating the need for back and forth emails between Find Help and each of you about, oh, here's some changes that were submitted. Have you processed them yet? Et cetera, et cetera. There's no need to have that follow-up process to make sure that the changes were actually dealt with, because they would automatically be notified when that happens. And this could hold true for any other case where you want to notify some kind of partner in that view, because they want to know when changes are submitted, whether that be, the local CCAC wants to have notification of whenever record changes are submitted in their view, so they know that you're keeping those on top of those and keeping them up to date. Whatever you need to use it for, but that the primary function is that with the 211 Ontario project, that they can keep on top of changes that were submitted via 211ontario.ca, know what the changes were, and know when they were processed without having to micromanage the process. Any questions about the feedback notifications? You'll notice there is an additional setting where you choose whether you want that person to receive a secondary notice, you want to choose whether you want the person who submitted the feedback to receive the email saying that you've processed their feedback. Why do we have that? I'll explain a scenario that should illustrate it pretty clearly. If someone submits feedback via 211ontario.ca and they get a notice saying, hey, we've processed your feedback, but that record hasn't actually been posted to 211ontario.ca yet, and if they go back to 211ontario.ca, they will be very confused because their changes won't be reflected there yet. So they'll have received an email saying, hey, we processed your changes. But when they go on 211ontario.ca, the changes won't be there yet. And so by blocking the notification to the submitter that that feedback has been processed, we prevent that from happening. So this gives you that capacity. And that's it for import-export. All right, so next I'll go into the page message enhancements, which is pretty simple. So from setup, page messages. Page messages allow you to print a message on a specific page and now in a specific view as well. But previously, page messages, you had to pick a single page, write a page message for that page, and it would apply to every view and only that specific page. So if you wanted a message on multiple pages, you had to create it multiple times, one for each page, and there was absolutely no way to do this on a view-by-view basis. So if you put it in one view, it was in every view. What is the purpose of page messages? The purpose of page messages is to allow you a way to create information that belongs on one page but not others. If you want message on every page, you have the ability to do that through custom headers and footers, menu messages, etc. You can put that information on every page or just in the menu. Page message is letting you put information only on specific pages. And those messages can contain HTML and formatting, and really anything you want, images, anything you can do with HTML, you can put in your page message. The page message currently still is only available between the header and the content being anything that changes from page to page. So it would go after the header and before the page content. But the big advantage and the big change that we have done is the ability to say you only want it to show up on certain views, and they can be both community information or volunteer, depending on your permission, and also as many different pages as you want. So this is a really big change where you no longer have to make one page message for every page you want it to appear on. You simply check off the pages that are relevant, and it will appear on all of those pages. Okay, any questions about page messages or when to use them or any of the changes, anything like that? We did cover it in the training, so I'm assuming that most people have already heard as much as they want to hear about it, but that's one of the new features. Okay, next, multiple inclusion policy. So from setup, I'm going to go, we now have a separate section specifically for inclusion policies. The list of inclusion policies is shared throughout the database, so it's not volunteer specific or CIC specific. There was one general list of inclusion policies in the database, and they can be accessed by either module of the software. The major change here is you can now have as many different inclusion policies as you want, and that's especially effective if you have specialized views in your database or multiple partner database or multiple data partners who each have their own views and their own policies around what records they show in their database and include in their database. Now you have the ability to customize those inclusion policies to each of those needs instead of having to have one blanket generic inclusion policy for the entire database. So every inclusion policy has specific language. So in this case, I have to specify whether it's English or French, and then I can add the policy content. And although they say CIC and volunteer in the name, I want to reiterate that they're not specifically CIC or volunteer. They're generic, and they're equally accessible from both modules of the software. So it's possible to have only a single inclusion policy that applies to the entire database. Once you've created your inclusion policies, you can go into your view setup. Sorry, Chris is asking me to mention that the inclusion policies and the names that you have for your inclusion policies in your database after the upgrade they were automatically converted from the inclusion policies that were in your global setup previously. So they would have automatically been marked as CIC English, CIC French, Volunteer English, French, and so on. If you did not have an inclusion policy in your database or you didn't have ones that applied to any particular language or module, they wouldn't be in your list. So from the view setup, you have the ability to select an inclusion policy, one for each language if you do have multiple languages in your database, and you would have to do that on a view-by-view basis. Keep in mind that it isn't really necessary to reference an inclusion policy in a view that isn't available to the public. Inclusion policies are only used when people do a suggest a new record, so not add a new record or existing record feedback, but specifically suggesting a brand new record. So you don't have to have an inclusion policy specified in every view. Any questions about the inclusion policy changes? Okay. All right. The next change that we have, I can't really demonstrate. I'll just have to explain it. And that is what in the enhancements database we're calling consistent domain name use following feedback submission. What this means is in a database where you have multiple views or multiple addresses, like I had mentioned before, like for info.cioc.ca and durham.cioc.ca in the same database, that when people submit feedback from forinfo.cioc.ca, when they get the emails about their feedback, they will all continue to say forinfo.cioc.ca and not some other address used in the database. In the past, all emails sent out of the system for feedback and so on all used the default address and view in your database, and there was no way to send people back to the same place that they had originally submitted feedback from. Now the system keeps track of which view and which website address that user used in order to submit the feedback and sends them back to the same place. And that includes your specialized views, where it might not have a special web address, but it does have a special view number. It will send them back to that special view in any emails that are sent about the feedback, so that they really do keep that consistent feel in the site. And that's especially important for any of your least views where your customers for the least views really want to have the feeling of having their own independent site, and they want to maintain that feeling through all of the exchanges with people who interact with the site. Now it will maintain that with more consistency. Any questions about that? Okay. So to accompany that is the use of special URLs with email update requests. So I'll do an email update request now. And I'll have to do advanced search to find one. Okay. So when you go to do your email update request, if you have multiple domain names configured with your database, you will be able to see not only specific views, which was a feature we had in the past, but also specific domain names. So you'll see here I have localhost CIOC, but down here I have the alternate address TICA CIOC, TICA being the name of my computer. I can pick which address I want to use to send out the email update request. And that, again, means that where we have multiple partners working in the same database and they want to each maintain the image of having an independent system, they will have the ability to select the name and address that applies to them and maintain the image of being an independent database. In order for this to be in the list, I have to have configured that website address within the database. So if you have a database name associated with your database and it isn't in the list to select from, that means that it isn't part of what's been configured in your database, and some of that has to be done directly by me or Chris. So you have to approach us in order to get a different website address set up in your database. Because you have to approach us to add new addresses to your database anyway, there's no plan at the moment to allow that to be something you configure yourself, because we already have to be involved in that setup. So since we're already doing it, there isn't any particular need to allow you to tinker with that setting, and in fact that could cause problems in your database unnecessarily. Okay, and last but not least is I will try and do the briefest of overviews about what our new volunteer profile feature does. Again, we've already covered this in some depth in a previous session, so if you are really interested, please go and review that training session and you'll get a little bit more detail. Volunteer profiles allow a user to create an account and a search profile. This is a public user to create an account and a search profile in the Volunteer Opportunities database and keep track of any of the applications that they have made for positions. So I don't even know if I know my login here. I don't think I do. I'll have to log out. But I'll use Internet Explorer and then I won't have to log out, but I don't remember my password. So here I am logged into my volunteer search profile. It tells me applications that I've made, allows me to modify my search profile, tells me all of the different sites on which my search profile will work, because for those of you who are operating multiple different views in your volunteer database, because they're for different geographic areas run by different partners and so on, it will list for the user all of the different sites for which their volunteer profile will operate. And then finally, some personal information that can be used to automatically fill in forms for them when they go to submit an application. With their search profile, they can choose to be notified whenever there are new opportunities or updated opportunities that match their criteria. And that's part of what we need the testing for, is to make sure that all of the notification information works and so on. This system has been designed to operate as independently as possible from the volunteer center who sponsors the database, so that they don't have to deal with things like, oh, I forgot my password from these users. The system automatically will do, I forgot my password, regenerate my password, email me a confirmation. All of that kind of stuff, the administrative stuff, is taken care of automatically by the system, so that it requires the least amount of intervention by the volunteer center. And again, there's lots more information if you go and review the volunteer training that we did. I think it was 2 weeks ago, might have been 3. That training recording has been posted. You have a question?
A couple questions. You had email updates still tied to an agency. Should you answer that one?
Email updates are absolutely still, there's a question, are email updates still tied to an agency? Absolutely they are. So we have not changed any of the functionality about identifying who the record owner is or the permissions around who can send updates for which records. That's all exactly the way it was. The only thing that we've changed is that the links that are part of the email going out, like click here to view your record or click here to submit feedback, we've changed it so that you have control over what that address is. Now, those of you who only have one address in your database, don't have a lot of public views, this means nothing to you. It has no relevance. You just let it pick the default one, which you will automatically do. It will automatically pick your default public view, and you don't have to think about it again. But for those of you that are working in a large partnership with multiple views, or even specialized views where you want to be able to send out feedback requests in the specialized views, this is going to allow you to do that.
And so there's a question that I don't actually understand about saying, so we can't set up a view on our own?
Oh, I think there was some confusion about someone asked, so we can't set up a view on our own. No, that's not the case at all. What I'm saying is a new URL for your database, a new website address, like let's take hamilton.cioc.ca is an alias for that website address that they usually use, which is inform.hamilton.ca or www.inform.hamilton.ca actually. So they have two different addresses that both access the same database. In order to set up those two addresses, I could do, the same would be said for search.hipinfo.info. It's the same as it used to be the same as hipinfo.search /search. It isn't anymore, but where there are multiple ways to access the same site, halton.cioc.ca or search.hipinfo.info, we have to configure those for you because it has to be done at a system administrative level where we actually have to go onto the server and add the new address to the server in order for it to work and go to the right database. But your individual view setup is absolutely 100% under your control, and you can make new views at any time. If you want a special address for that view, that's when you need to contact us. And adding new addresses to your database is a flat $50 fee to CIOC. It's been that way for a few years now, so you can add as many different addresses as you want to the database, and it's $50 a pop, basically. Whether it's a CIOC.ca address or your own custom address that you register with the domain name registrar. Okay, so that's basically it. And I have 15 minutes open for any other questions you've got. And I can certainly, Susan, go over the extra checklist and all of the other extra new fields that were added as part of the previous upgrade, because I know that you missed that.
But if there's none, you could potentially do the web stats again in case anyone missed that.
Okay, so I think there was a request that maybe I would go over the web statistics for anyone who missed that at the last session, so I can do that too. I'll first go over all of the new fields that were part of the previous upgrade for Susan and anyone else who wants a bit of a refresher about what those what all the recent new fields are and what they're used for. And then I'll take a few minutes to go through the web statistics tool and what that's for. And anyone who feels they're done is welcome to drop off the call now. We have covered the new features. I would anticipate that our next software upgrade will probably be late January to early February. And one of the major components of that is going to be a large number of French enhancements, as well as some other things, but I know that French enhancements will be the major component of the next software upgrade. Okay. So, new fields that we've had in the previous upgrade and the upgrade before. Submit changes to, we obviously discussed today, that's in the most recent upgrade. Besides that, we have our 3 new extra fields: extra drop-down A, extra drop-down B, and extra checklist. When you rename these 3 extra fields, because they are part of the advanced search form, it will automatically relabel those on your search forms as well. And of course, as it always does, it will rename them on any of your forms and record details. These 3 fields are not intended to be standardized in any way. So the whole point of these extra fields and any of the other extra fields is that each member should feel free to use these fields for any purpose whatsoever that suits their local needs. There should never be any attempt to standardize the content of an extra field. The whole point is this gives each of our members the ability to meet localized needs without worrying about what the standards are for those fields. We have previously had all of these text extra fields, some of which are indexed by the full text search engine and some of which are intentionally not indexed by the full text search engine. But these new fields allow you to select some standardized values that you can do through your checklist setup so that you can do drop-down values and checklist values instead of just a big lump of text. So going to our checklist setup, have extra drop-down A and B, an extra checklist. And it's very simple. You can provide English and French names and a display order if you wish to dictate the order in which those items will occur both on entry forms and also when the actual data is displayed in the record. I'll go to my advanced search and just show you the search forms that I have here. I have renamed my extra checklist to bus routes in this case. So you'll see that on my advanced search form, instead of saying extra checklist, it now says bus routes, with the intention that it would be possible for you to enter in all of the relevant bus routes in your area if you don't have a ridiculous number of them, and apply them by checklist to any of the records, and then have the capacity to search for different organizations that fall along that bus route. So I will do a quick search for that checklist. So I have 3 items that use that particular checklist. And you can see here's my bus routes. Those are, both the extra drop-downs and the extra checklist are linked. So you'll see the checklist allows you to pick multiple values. With the drop-down, you can pick only one value. So that's the difference between the drop-down versus checklist. But with the checklist, you can choose as many as you want, and with the drop-down, you have to choose a single value. These are each linked to searches, so when I click on them, it's going to bring up a search of any records that use that particular checklist item. Go back down again. If I click on list the first, it'll bring up that 3-record list that I had earlier. So on. List the third. When I go to update these records, I'll just do my search for bus routes. Nope, not subroutes. you'll see with the checklist, you can just check off the ones that apply, and you can have as many in your list as you like. And with the drop-downs, you simply pick from a predefined list of a single value. Okay? So that's how those particular items work. In addition to the extra checklist and the extra drop-downs, we do have an additional field which has been labeled for a purpose with the intent that if it was desired, this information could be shared from database to database. This is unlike the extra information, which we automatically assume has no standards whatsoever and that everyone is free to do with whatever they like. We also have the, I'm going to go to the checklist again, the membership field, which is intended to be used for a specific purpose. And even though it's intended to be used for a specific purpose, as with any field in CIOC, you do have the ability to rename that field and use it for something else. But for instance, unlike the extra checklists, if I rename this field from membership to bus routes, let's say I decided I wanted to use this one for bus routes, on my advanced search form, it's still going to say membership type. It doesn't have that automatic renaming that the extras do because it isn't specifically intended to be a field that you are going to repurpose. Okay, it's intended to be although it isn't an official Inform Ontario standard, it's intended to be used in a standard way with the intention that you could share this type of information with another database, with another partner, and use it in a more official capacity. What types of information would you want to keep in the membership? That could be anything from AIRS membership, Inform Ontario membership, Better Business Bureau, whatever you want. The idea being we do have cases where our members have had requests from certain groups to document membership in a particular group. And pardon me, I'm going to sneeze. And this will allow you to not only document that in a standardized way, but make use of the ability to search for that information and bring up groups of records based on their inclusion in that group. Okay, so not that this person is a member of Inform Ontario, but you can do a quick and easy search of bring me up with whatever other criteria, bring me up Ontario in my database, or whatever the membership is that applies. And there could be local groups or associations that apply to your area but not elsewhere, and that's fine. Any questions about any of those? Finally, the other new fields that we got with our previous upgrade, go back, I'm going to go way back. I'm going to go back to the setup area, are the employees field. And there are two of them, the detailed employees field and the employees range field. And that allows you to document the number of employees that belong to a particular organization or business. There are two fields because of the reluctance in some cases to provide very specific information about the number of employees. The specific field has slots for full-time, part-time, and total employees, whereas the range just specifies, oh, is it 0 to 10 employees, 10 to 20, and so on. I'll just do a quick search for a number of employees. So these are the options available, 1 to 4, 5 to 19, and so on, with the intention that you could track this in whatever way was most appropriate, and it may not be the same between different records because not every organization is comfortable with sharing the same detail of information. So that's basically it for the number of employees. I don't know if anyone has any further questions. The other, of course, new field that we got is the NAICS classification system. And besides that, in our previous upgrade, Susan, we got some further address searching by, I think the postal code search was already there, but the street address searching is new. These are things that were rolled in from the business database. So I think that's about it. if you're curious as to what else was in the previous upgrade, you can find any major enhancement, anything that wasn't a bug fix, basically, will be documented in our enhancements database. So you can just do a search for completed and check the completion date, and that should tell you what has changed since your last upgrade. Keeping in mind your last upgrade was quite early this year, February or March maybe. I would have to check my records to see when we upgraded you, but it was in that time frame. Okay, I'll quickly talk a bit about the web stats. Our monitoring system for making sure that the CIOC servers haven't gone bust at any given time. Each of the main database contacts or any of the databases hosted with CIOC should have received a login and password to access their web server statistics. These are very different from the statistics that you can get access to in your CIOC database because they track all kinds of traffic to your database, not just record views. So that would be images, style sheets, search results, absolutely anything whatsoever, even you getting your daily download. Anything that is done on your site will be tracked. But you can also get some quite interesting information out of the tool. So I'll go to, okay. So these statistics are only available from the time of the server move, and that means from the first week in August, not quite August 1st, but around the first week of August. The types of information you can get here are, you'll see them, unique visitors, number of visits, pages, hits, and bandwidth. Okay, so those 5 types of information. Unique visitors is based on the IP address of the visitor. The number of visits is the number of times that they visited the site. This is different from hits or pages, which are talking about the actual files that they access. A visit, I could access many different pages or other files in the context of a visit, and that's why the number of visits is so much lower than the number of pages.
And a note on that, though, that there are some caveats about those numbers. Those numbers are not going to be exact, and I am writing up some information about that in response to Gary's discussion about what some of these terms actually mean. So there'll be some more detail about that if you're truly interested in what those numbers mean as far as people coming to your site.
And finally, we have the bandwidth, which discusses specifically how much traffic from a size of the file perspective that your site has used in that time. And this is going to be thrown off significantly if you get your download frequently, because that is such a gigantic file. So this is mainly useful to Chris and I from a planning perspective, rather than useful for you in your analysis of what kind of traffic you're getting. You can pick either a month and a year, or you can choose year and show for the entire year. So if I want to see all of 2008, in this case, again, it's only going to be from the first week of August, not from January. Okay, and also keep in mind that the more you cluster together to do analysis, the less accurate certain kinds of information get, like unique visitors, because over time a lot of things change significantly, and over time certain kinds of analysis, like I'll show you down here, where you're trying to determine where people are located, that information can get less and less accurate over time, because IP addresses and where they're located physically changes significantly over time. Okay, so enough about that. You'll have your monthly history broken down by each of these 5 categories. We're in the middle of the month of November, so you'll be able to see that it's lower. It will show you which days of the month you're most busy. And sometimes there are the most bizarre spikes. and we'll find that this can be anywhere from a spam bot crawling your site to Google or Yahoo doing a major crawl of your site. Those are the most often causes of huge spikes like this. It's not actually normal human beings. It's usually some kind of a robot or a crawler causes massive spikes of this kind. And we can just be thankful with the new CIOC servers that, generally speaking, they don't bring us down as they used to in the old servers, because we couldn't handle these massive spikes. Again, you get all the breakdown of how much traffic by day of the month, so on, days of week. One of the most interesting traffic patterns are through hours of the day when most accesses happen, and breakdown by geographic region, which again, I will warn you, gets less and less accurate over time, and should be taken with a grain of salt. So when we're looking here at, I don't see any here, we've found that we in Burlington will sometimes come up as St. Catharines. So again, you need to take it with a grain of salt. We use a free to determine the geographic area, and it is not as accurate as the paid service is. It's not as up to date. So that influences how accurate this is. However, it does really give you a sense of how well you are serving your target area, because usually, even if it's a little off, for instance, thinking that Burlington is St. Catharines, it still does give you a good sense that you are largely staying in your local area. Okay?
And when you see things like Russian Federation and Los Angeles, I'm pretty sure that Los Angeles one is...
That's Google.
No, it's not.
There's one.
That is a spam harvester.
Yeah.
I know that one for sure. That one's likely a spam harvester. So we use that kind of information to try and stem the tide on people harvesting spams.
Right. So we do look at your web statistics for various purposes, including looking for crawlers, also looking for error messages that are occurring to try and diagnose software problems and so on. You'll get a sense of the different search engines or other bots that are crawling your site. How long people are staying, take this with a huge grain of salt, because this is not particularly accurate. And for instance, if it says something like 0 to 30 seconds, that might mean that they only viewed one page, got the information they needed, and left. And that isn't a bad thing. In fact, that often says, hey, I found the information I needed right away. That can be a really good thing. And how it judges a visit is, that's a really difficult thing to judge. But it does give you an interesting perspective on how your information is being accessed and used. Let's see, what's another good thing? Which things are being accessed in your site? This can often give you some really fascinating information about specific records that are being used. I happen to know that the two most popular records in Inform Hamilton are the British High Commission and Jackson Square. Let's see which one of these are. Jackson Square, and this is probably the British High Commission. And it is the British High Commission. So again, you get a really interesting perspective on the traffic that way. And in addition, there is a section down here, scroll, pardon me, where it tells you what search engine keywords people are using when they first find your site. So again, we know that some of the top records, or the two top records in Hamilton happen to be Jackson Square and the British High Commission. And we really see the evidence of that when we know that we've got 5,000 people that searched for Jackson Square to find Inform Hamilton. It's almost 1,000 people that found it through the British High Commission. Okay? So it does give you a bit of an interesting perspective on how people are finding you. And finally, this last section is mainly of interest to Chris and I to identify when there's a problem. And in the case of 404 for Hamilton, I know exactly why this is. It's primarily because of the removal of the business database that they used to have. So it's people trying to find files in the business database that don't exist anymore. And there are also things like looking for a robots.txt file, which describes to the search engines how to crawl your site, and all search engines that, all reasonable, decent search engines that access your site are going to first check for this file. So you'll all see this frequently in your weblogs is looking for robots.txt. But it can give you some really interesting information about problems in your site where you have linked things incorrectly, like something wrong in your header or footer, where you haven't properly linked something or you're linking to the wrong place. So it's not a bad idea to check your 404s and see if any of them are something you can deal with. In addition, if it's from an external site where they've linked into your site and gotten a bad page, it's a really good idea to visit that page and find out why they're linking to the wrong page and potentially tell them to update their pages. Okay, scroll back up here. Besides search engines, it does give you a list of other sites that that are responsible for a lot of your traffic. So settlement.org, Contact Hamilton, other places that are frequently directing people to your site. Okay, any questions about the weblogs? Again, Chris is going to put some detailed information up on the CIOC bulletin board as well.